Hi, welcome everybody. We're hosting a special podcast today with our guest, Aine Kelly-Costello, who is going to be speaking about the intersections between disability justice and environmentalism. I'm Amy Parker. I'm at Portland State University. We host a conference called Mobility Matters. We have preparation programs in orientation and mobility and for teachers of the visually impaired. Today, we're most honored that Aine will be facilitating a conversation with Emily Owen's class at the Washington State School for the Blind. So you'll get to hear the voices of different students who are asking questions with Aine and having a natural conversation. Now I'm going to turn it over to Aine to introduce herself, to introduce their work, and everyone might share their pronouns as they go around. And we really appreciate this opportunity to learn from each other. Aine?
Hi, Amy, and thank you so much to Emily and the students for inviting me to be part of this conversation. So my name is Aine Kelly-Costello. I use she, they pronouns. I'm currently based in Norway, but I mainly grew up in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And over the past 8 or 9 years, one of the really sources of hope and community for me has been being involved in climate campaigning and also in various different areas of disability campaigning and the intersections between the two of those. I initially got involved in climate campaigning when I was at university. I was studying nothing to do with it whatsoever. I was studying music and arts, or arts being English and Spanish. And I went to a guest talk by a co-founder of grassroots climate justice organization 350.org, and that was Bill McKibben. Found out about the fossil fuel divestment movement, and when a divestment campaign was being started up on my university campus, I got very involved in that, and that was my start into climate campaigning. And over subsequent years, I got more involved in the wider disability community. So I'm blind and I'm now chronically ill as well. I have long COVID for the last couple of years. And a few years ago, I also started working as a journalist a little bit. So my interests are really in the intersections between disability, climate, and media. I wrote my master's thesis on climate change journalism as well. So I think that's enough about me for now, but it's great to be here, and maybe I can pass over to Theorius for a first question.
Hi, my name is Theorius, and my pronouns are they, them, theirs. And my first question is, have you struggled with being taken seriously as a disabled journalist and activist? And if so, what have you done to overcome this?
Thanks, Theorius. That's a great question. I think I haven't had people doubt me to my face, I would say. I think that when I was working as a journalist, one thing that was tricky was that the system that we were using to upload stories, to file stories, was not screen reader accessible. So I couldn't file my own stories, and I also couldn't be assigned to any stories where you needed to be updating them because that wasn't accessible. And as a result of that, I ended up being assigned a lot less to cover. But what was good that came out of that was I was able to pitch a lot more stories. And I had just come from working in a role in disability advocacy in the last couple of years before that. And I had a lot of networks within the disability community, and disability related reporting is not sufficiently covered everywhere, and New Zealand is no exception. So I took advantage of that, and I pitched quite a few disability related stories, and just being able to do that. And yes, sometimes it did feel like maybe I needed to do more explaining to an editor who was very unfamiliar with that territory than I would have, for example, if we had more disabled editors in newsrooms. But on the whole, I was able to cover quite a lot during that internship. And I did feel that my colleagues were respectful of that. For example, just before I left, I did a training with them on disability related reporting, which, I mean, it was a bit intimidating because I was an intern, right? And they all had more experience than I did on reporting, but I guess I just had to try and back myself and remember that actually I have been involved in the disability community for quite a while, have done quite a lot of reading and learning, and in terms of language and respect and lived experience of disability and authenticity, I can actually offer something. So that felt like one good way to contribute to that. And as a campaigner, I don't think so. I think that sometimes it falls on disabled people to be advocating for what we need or our access needs more than it should do. Sometimes it's the case that you ask for something and that you kind of have to keep asking for it. So for example, sometimes like if you take even just a seemingly innocent example, like writing image descriptions on social media, it takes people a while to get in the habit of something like that. But yeah, I would say what makes a difference, and what I was very lucky with was having good allies in that space. So sometimes it would take some time for people to form habits, but on the whole, I have been working with people who wanted to do that. And that would be a piece of advice. I know there's another question about getting involved in activism as a young disabled person. And yeah, try to find people that you think you can build good relationships with would be a piece of advice I would have in terms of who else is involved in the thing that you care about. Yeah. Maybe Javi, do you want to ask a question?
Hi, my name is Javi, and my pronouns are he, him. And my question for you is, what do you think would affect climate change more, the growth of cities or the decrease in plants around the world?
Yeah, that's it's an interesting question because there's a lot of different aspects that affect the growth of cities. But one aspect I would bring up is that population growth is not the main driver of climate change. And when I was just thinking about this question before, I Googled an article from the Washington Post that talks about this, which I'll quote a little bit from that because I think it sums it up well. So it says, a small minority of wealthy people produce the majority of global greenhouse gas emissions. Their consumption habits have a much greater impact than overall population numbers. It's true that the planet can't support unlimited population growth. And then that's Ramaswamy said, but if people can figure out how to moderate our consumption and meet our needs without fossil fuels, experts say, it is possible for all of us to live sustainably and well, even if there are more of us. And I can send you the link to that article. It goes on to say some quite interesting things about figuring out sort of the formula for how population and impact and sort of affluence and fossil fuel burning all interact with each other. But yeah, I think the way that cities are set up also has a lot to do with it. If you set up a city with very poor public transport infrastructure, very poor pedestrian and cycling and accessible infrastructure for getting around, and everybody is needing to use cars and travel long distances, and there are not subsidies to make it affordable to switch over to electric vehicles and so on, then of course, urban sprawl in that scenario is going to create more fossil fuel burning. But yeah, I think a lot of the drivers of climate change at the end of the day are what is driving fossil fuel extraction and burning. Like that's the key question. In New Zealand, it's an agriculture problem too, but yeah, it's mainly those aspects, I think. Could I pass to Addie for a question? I
One
can't.
moment, excuse us. Addie is working on unmuting.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
This is Amy interjecting as we're waiting for Addie to get queued up. I just want everyone to know that we will have links in the show notes for this session. We can link to the articles that Anya is sharing, as well as some about her bio and writing and their excellent work.
There you go. You got it.
All right, I think we have Addie ready.
Hi, I'm Addie. My pronouns are he, she, her, I might say. My question is, how can we make the world a better place as a school?
That's a great question. Thanks, Addie. Emily was telling me a little bit about your class and what you've been learning. And I think having that education around environmental science is super great. And as well as that, being able to share that information. And I would be really interested, I don't know if we have time to talk about it today, but having educational resources that are actually accessible, working on figuring out what kind of curriculum works for you all in terms of learning about environmental and climate science. And then, of course, I think learning about sort of the social and political side of climate change is also really important. But yeah, kind of co-creating that type of curriculum is cool in itself, I think. But yeah, I think different people will want to be involved in different areas. Some people find the sort of waste reduction stuff, plastic reduction, a good start. For me, what motivated me to get involved in climate action was, even though there are ways of living more sustainably in terms of waste reduction and other measures like that, I was really motivated when I understood that the main drivers of climate change are the systemic things that we were talking about a few minutes ago, in terms of the basically profit-seeking nature of the fossil fuel industry, which keeps extracting more and more and more coal, oil, and gas, even though it has way too much extracted already to burn the planet way past our 1.5 degrees target in the Paris Accord. So understanding that as a systemic problem and finding a way through the fossil fuel divestment movement to be saying, okay, well, if institutions and schools, universities, I actually don't know how it applies to schools in the same way, but definitely university endowments, churches, banks, cities, etc., are pulling their money out of this polluting industry, then that's a way to collectively undermine its social license. So to me, that kind of campaigning was motivating. There's obviously the school strike movement around climate, which has a whole bunch of interesting ways to get involved in different places, as far as I can tell from social media. Of course, it is tricky during the pandemic. But yeah, I think finding something that you find motivating, personally motivating, is important, because whatever it is, you'll be doing it in your own time. And the other thing that I would say that for me, I really appreciated about 350, the organization doing the divestment campaigning, was that they have a really great focus on upskilling campaigners. So I learned a lot of the fundamentals that I would then use in other types of campaigning around what different processes could you go through to make a campaign strategy, and what are some good ways of framing campaign messaging, what does framing even mean, and just a lot of different understandings of different types of campaign tactics. And a lot of that I got through being involved in that campaign. So that was an education in itself for me. So yeah, whatever motivates you to get involved, I guess would be my answer to that one. But yeah, I think Emily also mentioned that you're looking at getting in touch with a local regenerative farming place as well. So I mean, whatever you can do in your local community is also great. Yeah.
if I could brag, this is Amy speaking, just a little bit about the Washington State School for the Blind. They are a very progressive school, and some of that has been happening under Emily's leadership around sustainability. So I love Addie's question about localism and what you can do right where you are. You know, not thinking that it's too far away or there's nothing that you can do as an individual. So I wondered if one of the students or if Emily could talk about some of what you're doing, because also my students and Dr. Holly Lawson's students at Portland State are also really interested in how teachers can support students with visual impairment, how orientation and mobility specialists can support students with visual impairments to be active, to be environmentally conscious, to be thoughtful about climate change, to be advocates if that's something that interests them. And many people do ask, they think, well, you know, the uninformed think, how can a person who's blind or a person who's deafblind or a person with visual impairment even participate in the sciences? In sustainability science, how is that material made accessible for them to understand the visual knowledge base or how to become an advocate? So maybe Emily or one of the students could comment on what WSSB is doing, because we can really learn from you.
Sure. Thank you, Amy. I will just share a tiny snippet and then I might turn it over to a student. But basically how we've modeled this class is we focus semester 1 on water and semester 2 is land. And we're looking at those umbrella topics and their relationship with climate and their relationship with local sustainability, health, water quality, and particularly in soil. So we've been doing a lot of project-based learning. So long-term monitoring of Vancouver Lake is one. We're also starting a garden here that's a little more in depth, and we want to do some regenerative farming practices. So those are a lot of hands-on, but I might turn it over to a student to kind of share how that has manifested for these. So Theorius, would you like to share a little bit?
Absolutely. So we started off the school year by rejuvenating our garden. We had a couple of old plants, and so we dug all the dead ones up and we planted some cover crop. And then we did a lesson on what a cover crop is and why it's important to rejuvenate the soil and put nutrients back into it. And while that grew, we learned about watersheds and water testing. And we use these accessible devices called LabQuest. They can be hooked up to various testing tools. And it auditorily reads out what's on the screen. And it's made by BVI individuals, blind and visually impaired. And we use those to test water quality at the Vancouver Lake watershed. And we've been having an ongoing project of testing the fecal coliform levels and watching for algae blooms. And recently we've been going over how the water cycle and soil quality affects the environment and how important it is to focus on those when trying to better our environment and trying to undo the harm that climate change has caused. More specifically, returning nutrients to the soil and trying to reduce the amount of impervious surfaces that we have on our grounds and in cities in general. And we also, I'm very proud of remembering this word, it's called transpiration. It's where, I worked very hard to memorize that word. It's where essentially trees sweat. When it gets hot out, they release small little bits of water. And that's why the Amazon, even if you go dead in the center of the Amazon rainforest, it is super humid because it's so hot that the trees are doing transpiration. And so that's why cities like New York City, who are in the northeastern coast, who should be nice and cool, are super hot during the summer. It's because there's so much concrete and there's not enough plants to have that transpiration to cool down the air. And there's so many impervious surfaces that there's nothing to keep it cool.
Thank you, Theorius. Is there anybody, Javi or Addie, is there anything you would like to add? Or Laura, anybody? Okay. Avi? Okay.
Emily, you must be, this is Amy speaking. You must be beaming with pride. Theorius, that was an outstanding. I learned from you. Thank you so much for sharing what your class is doing. Thanks for sharing about transpiration. That isn't a word that I was familiar with. So really, really grateful for you sharing that. I'll turn it over to Anya now.
I'm also super excited that you're all learning about those topics because honestly, I'm pretty jealous because that's not an education I ever had access to. And by the time I kind of realized I was quite interested in climate change, yeah, I wasn't studying that. So those aspects are something that I I very much hope it's not too much extra work, but that your class will be able to maybe make some of the ways that you've been doing stuff, the water quality measurement devices that you've been using, and like maybe share some of those tools on a web page or something like that, to be able to give other people ideas for accessible sustainability and environment and climate education resources as well, because I think that's super valuable, both for school students but also for university students. Yeah,
Absolutely.
so
Um,
maybe we can just keep going around, and I don't know who wants to ask a question next, but yeah.
I see Emily has her hand up.
I
Sure.
just wanted to mention one thing to touch on what you said, Anya, which is this group will be taking part in what's called the Watershed Congress, which is where numerous schools come together and share the data we've collected over the year monitoring Vancouver Lake. So they'll be putting together a big presentation to present at this Congress. Their findings, as well as sort of analyzing that data and what that means for the health of the watershed in our area. So we can definitely keep you all in the loop about that if you're interested in following up with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I also have a question from another student from another class, if that would be appropriate. Would that be an okay to ask?
Yeah, sure.
This is from a student named Evan, and his question is, how might extreme weather, so speaking of climate change, affect travel for people with disabilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in a lot of different ways, right? Because extreme weather can affect transport access, and it can also affect whether people have access to support networks that might help with travel, and even how your mobility aids would work in those situations. So, and it can affect our bodies as well. So, I think there's a lot of different, different ways that could interact. But ultimately, when transport routes become unusable or less usable, it's disabled people who are going to struggle with that. And I think having plans in place, if you live in an area which is susceptible to a particular form of extreme weather, which is getting more frequent and more severe under climate change, climate breakdown, being prepared for what you would do in that situation is really important. This is not like I guess an example that's like super duper affected, but in my case, for instance, I have long COVID and I'm very susceptible to heat. My body does not tolerate heat well. So even though I'm living very far up north, I'm living above the Arctic Circle, it's warming much faster than it should be up here. It's warming, I think, 3 or 4 times faster than the rest of the planet, which means that even here, and the houses are very well insulated. Last summer when we had a heat wave, even though it was, I'm not sure what this is in Fahrenheit, sorry, but it was like maybe 31 degrees Celsius in a very well insulated house, and with a chronic illness, that was very hot. So I learned some techniques for what I needed to do in the heat. And yeah, I think for everyone, just being able to be as prepared as possible and know, okay, like if these transportation routes were to become blocked, and who who is the closest to me, who is my neighbor or the person that I would be able to go to for support in that situation. And maybe just having those networks of being able to check in on people, and potentially also, memorizing the numbers of one or two people in case you needed to be able to contact people. So I guess it's just a lot of things with being disabled. Preparation and planning helps. So I guess that's what I would say on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe others have ideas about that question as well.
This is Amy. In the interim, I think that emergency preparedness is something that all of us are considering carefully in the Pacific Northwest, because of seismic activity, potential earthquakes. We are thinking about communication, and then leadership by disabled people in emergency preparedness has been really critical. We'll also include some in the show notes about the Helen Keller National Center, some leadership by a woman who happens to be deafblind, Dr. Megan Conway, who has been working with a network of people with disabilities around emergency preparedness, particularly around communication. So as Anya was mentioning, memorizing those numbers in case your cellular network goes down, in case you have to use a different form of communication, or perhaps a landline line, or perhaps your phone is damaged and you have to use someone else's phone to call someone who's nearby, who can be a support person. It's kind of about interconnectedness. Would you say, Anya?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, do we have other questions from anyone in the group that would like to chat, or comments, Anya, about maybe a story or some advice that you would give to students who are at this point in their lives, thinking about careers, thinking about their futures? What advice would you have?
When I was roughly the age that I'm guessing you're all between kind of like 14 and 18 or roughly thereabouts, I think I was asked quite a lot what I was going to do. And the implication was like, I'm supposed to know what I'm going to do with my whole life somehow. And I definitely had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I knew that I wanted to study music at university. My mom gave me the advice that I should not only study music, I should study more than one thing in case that didn't work out, which I think was good advice. But yeah, I really did not have any idea. And I think knowing that you can choose something and you can decide that you don't like it and you can go choose something else is, I needed to hear that, I think, when I was at your age. Also that you might pick up skills from somewhere that's not a traditional university education, which might be part of being at university, as was the case for me in campaigning. Or maybe you'll take a gap year. I'm not sure if that's what's called in the US, but take a year off after you finish school, to maybe do some internships, or I don't know, learn a trade or travel or whatever. I know travel is more complicated at the moment because of the pandemic, but there are a lot of different ways to learn and to develop a career. I am not even sure exactly how I understand the word career in my own case, because I've moved around between different areas, but I think that developing a broad skill set is also of benefit, and learning which different areas you're interested in, and you can find ways to integrate those, I think. So for example, when I was doing my master's, which was in investigative journalism, I was happy to be able to write my thesis about climate change journalism because, of course, I am interested in climate change. And yeah, last year, when I was thinking about how I could do something in the media space, I decided to start a podcast called Disability Crosses Borders, which is about the intersections of disability, migration, and culture. And for me, that worked out because I really wanted to do kind of my own thing in order to be able to go at my own speed, and take all the sort of the time and care I wanted to, and make it accessible. And so, yeah, I think just figuring out something that you're interested enough in to like start off with, or finding some kind of opportunity that can give you a foot in the door to something else, and just taking it from there, really. And finding there's always a balancing act between doing lots of things, saying yes to lots of things to learn more and build networks and build connections and skills, and on the other hand, not kind of burning out and overburdening yourself. So I think that's always a balancing act. But yeah, just gotta give things a go and also be okay with knowing that it's fine not to do absolutely everything. I think that would be my advice.
Outstanding. This is Amy. We may only have a minute left in our time together. Is there any other closing comments or questions that folks have for Anya, knowing that you can stay in touch with them at a distance, but this is our go at a conversation today. Any last words or questions, comments?
Theorius, I have one.
Yeah, go for it.
What advice do you have for disabled youth who are interested in environmental activism?
Yeah, I think some of the themes that I was kind of touching on before, in terms of finding a way in that resonates with you, that you personally find compelling enough to be doing in your free time. But also, if you can go along to an event, or even if it's like a Zoom thing or whatever, but if you can go to something where you can start to get to know people already in the space that you want to get in, and like see if you feel like you get along with them or might get along with them. Like, does it have a good vibe? I cannot overemphasize how important it is to find people that you work well with, because it makes such a difference to how the space will feel and to whether you'll want to stay involved. And yeah, if you can find a way to be involved in an organization like 350, or I'm sure there are also others. Unfortunately, I don't come from your region, so I couldn't specifically say. But if you can find climate justice spaces, environmental justice spaces, whatever, that really have sort of the infrastructure to help you learn campaigning skills as you go, that is also very useful, if that can work out. So yeah, that would be my advice. But yeah, it was really great to talk to you all today. Thank you so much for your questions. And I was really thrilled to be able to learn more about your sustainability and environmental science and climate education. So I look forward to checking out your water presentation when that's available.
Thank you so much. Yes, we decided we're going to change the world with plants. That's kind of what our group has decided. So we'll keep you posted about that.
Awesome.
And if anybody wants to log off and say any last words or say goodbye, thank you so much for meeting with us and taking the time to share your story and experience. And thank you, Amy, for organizing this as well.
Well, this is Amy. We are more than thrilled to have someone like Anya helping us keynote at Mobility Matters. I know that you all may be listening into that presentation as well. Appreciate the work at WSSB, and thank you, students, for your thoughtful questions and for teaching us as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Awesome.
I am keeping myself. I didn't mention our watershed models.